Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2026 Move to France Q&A. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation, and our goal is to help you to create a successful and sustainable life in France. And we do that by helping make sure that you get the right visa type and following through on all of the admin so that we're supporting you from preparing for your relocation to France through the first couple months and hopefully years into your life in France. It's important more than ever to make sure that you're looking at your relocation to France comprehensively because there have been so many changes and so many updates to procedures, and things are really interdependent. So it's important to know with all of the administration that the healthcare system relies on the visa, and the visa relies on having a healthcare and a French bank account, and the French bank account relies on having an apartment. And so, as you can see, there are so many things to get done during your first year in France and as you prepare to move. And the goal is to make sure that you're getting all of these things set up properly so that you are able to stay and do whatever it is that you want to do in France. In addition to running the relocation agency, I'm also the author of Foolproof French Visas, which is in its sixth edition. This is the complete 2026 edition, about all of the different visa types for moving to France. So we'll get you the link to that a little bit later. I host the podcast Profiles in Transformation if you want to listen to some stories about people who moved to France. And we are going to have the second annual Relocate to France virtual summit in June, June 15th to 19th. And that is going to be on all kinds of different topics related to moving to France. And we're going to have not just me doing presentations, but many professionals in the relocation field, from property finders to insurance companies to bank and insurance companies, presenting on everything that you need to know. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I did just get back on the Eurostar about 2 hours ago. We were in Cheltenham, UK, in the Cotswolds this weekend for the French Property Show, where we were talking about visas and buying French property with people who are looking to move to France from the UK. So I'm a little bit tired. We had a really busy weekend. It was a really fun event. So I don't know if any of you here today are from the show this weekend. And if you are, then welcome and congratulations on continuing to plan your trip after all of the information that you must have gotten over the weekend. All right, so let's jump right in and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can in an hour. So Martha asks, my husband and I are retired and own a house in Brittany. We visit for 3 months at a time. We have a French friend living on our property in a lifetime usufruit arrangement. He's in poor health, and I'm concerned that I may need to help and handle the house, so the timing might not fit with our tourist visas. What should we apply for? So without becoming residents. So in that situation, probably the best thing to apply for is a long-term non-renewable visa, and it can be for up to a year. So it's very similar to all of the requirements for the renewable visitor visa, but then you're making it clear that you don't want to become French residents, that you're not going to go through all of the admin to get onto the French system, and you're going to be leaving at the end of the year. So, especially if you're not planning on spending more than 6 months in France and you won't be establishing true residence, you would still be able to go back and forth to France without regard for the 90 out of 180-day rule. Jerry, I went to a website to get a quote for health insurance for our visa application. Not ready to purchase just yet. A couple look good and say they meet the visa requirements. Is it safe to buy? I don't know that particular website. We have about 3 different policies that we get quotes for all of our clients that we know work and that are not too expensive. I would not recommend going onto a random website, and I also wouldn't recommend using the VFS or TLS policies because they're not great. They're expensive for what they are, and I also just think generally that it's a conflict of interest for the visa company to offer insurance and then sometimes tell you that because you haven't purchased their policy that the consulate might not accept it, which I dislike strongly. So you need to be careful. And even with some of the more popular or more well-known visa insurance providers, you have to look carefully at what is covered by the policy and what the price is, because there are some companies that work as insurance brokers and that do provide this policy, but they offer almost identical policies for vastly different prices. So be really careful when you're shopping for insurance, and we can make some recommendations if you need them. Laura, What is the best way to get a French driver's license if I live in a state that does not have reciprocity with France? Okay, so you have two options. One is that you plan in advance to exchange your license before you leave for France to a license from a state that will enable you to exchange it. As long as that's done before you apply for your visa, we haven't had any issues up until this point. You will have to provide driving record from both the new state and the old state showing that you've been driving for more than 7 years to make sure that you're not going to get the young person new driver license or rate on your car insurance. So that's option one. Option two is you can do what French people do and take the driving test. So that would be the written and the practical driving test. Now, it is possible to take the written test with a translator at the prefecture. Not all prefectures have frequent exam dates, but there are some that do. There is a school in the Paris area, Fahrenbeck, that is geared towards this population. So people who have a valid foreign driver's license who don't need to do the whole set of driver's lessons from scratch. And they work with you on just making sure that you understand the French rules in a way that will help you to pass the test. So if you do need to take the test because you can't exchange your license, you need to start doing that within 2 months of arriving in France because you're not allowed to drive beyond one year. And it will take quite a while to get up to speed, pass the test, get a test date. There are a lot of schools where test dates are backed up for quite some time. Also, Laura, my boyfriend and I will be moving to France together. He does not have the minimum necessary income or assets, but I have more than enough for two people. Does France recognize unmarried couples for the purposes of financial ability? It's not a great idea. Typically, any case where you're going to have to be providing financial support to someone you are not in a legally defined relationship with, that is not going to go over well with the consulate. And so there are a lot of people who get visas rejected for exactly those reasons. If he is young enough to be an au pair, if he can enroll as a student and and meet the lesser financial burden of 615 euros per month for a student visa, that could potentially qualify him. But I would not typically recommend that you try to sponsor him financially because my suspicion is that that would be a really easy way for them to reject his visa. If you want to look at all the visa types he might be eligible for, I would recommend reading the book. I have a timing question. If I want my visa to start on November 1st, does that mean the visa can be issued 90 days before on August 1st? Can I complete the, okay. So in terms of the timeline for applying for the visa, you can have your visa appointment 90 days before you plan to arrive in France. You can also submit the online form and finalize it 90 days before you are going to arrive in France. So for a November 1st arrival date, the earliest you can possibly submit the form and have your visa appointment is around November 3rd or 4th. That being said, you can start filling out the form, have a draft, and use the draft visa form to make your appointment with TLS or VFS in a little bit of advance of those 90 days. Now, I really only recommend doing that if you need to travel quite a ways to your visa appointment because it doesn't take that long to get your visa. Typically, it's 7 to 10 days to get your visa back. Canada does take a little bit longer. Lana, what is the best way to look for rentals in Paris and what documents and requirements are needed to rent an apartment? So the thing that you're going to go do to start is Garant Me. That is an insurance policy that you will purchase as a lease guarantee service from a private provider, and it will cost about 4 to 4.5% of 1 year of rent. The problem when you are a foreigner in France is that you don't have payslips, contracts, bank accounts, any of the documents that France would require to one, rent an apartment to you, and two, sell the landlord their insurance, which covers tenants that don't pay. And so you're going to need to get your own type of insurance. Now, some of the companies will help you reach out to landlords and have some agencies that they work with that they know will accept Garant Me. You can also, I mean, we always recommend that people work with somebody who is specifically looking at finding rentals in Paris. You do need to have a good budget for that because it's a lot of work to find you an apartment as a foreigner, but if you do have a good budget, if you want to send me a message and let me know what your budget is, I can put you in touch with the right person. Mahaya, I've been told if you're selling property in the US, you should do that before you consider applying for any type of visa. Is this true? And does this include student visas? So you will become a tax resident when you arrive in France to reside. And the thing about selling property is that the capital gains will not be considered those of a primary residence in France. So typically, accountants that we've talked to, we have done webinars on French taxes and it has included this topic. Typically, the advice is to sell within the first year of arriving in France because it's considered still part of the moving process. If you hold on to your property any longer, you could have some capital gain liability, particularly if you're not paying any capital gains in the US. If I'm planning on selling property in the US this year and another one possibly next year, is there a point in scheduling a consultation with you or should I wait until the property sells? You certainly can. We have people who are moving while they're in the process of selling property. We have people who want to sell first and then apply for the visa once the property sells. So it's really up to you. We can certainly talk about timeline, visa type, and all of the French admin questions that we'll need to answer for you during the consultation, even if you haven't sold the property yet and you're not sure exactly when you want to go. Let me give you a link to that in the chat. Lauren asked, how can I get the updated 2026 version of your book? I purchased the last version and was hoping to upgrade. So if you purchased the 2025 version of the book, you can leave a review and send us an email with like just a screenshot of your review on Amazon, and we will give you access to the ebook version of the 2026 edition. And you can send that, it's support@yourtransformation.com, which is also the email address. If you reply to one of the Q&A reminders, it's the same email address that it goes to. Laura from Australia, if you're on a working holiday visa from Australia and have a job and meet the other requirements, can you apply for a carte vitale? And if so, if the carte vitale is granted to you, does that mean you can stay in France after your 1 year work holiday visa expires? So a carte vitale is just proof that you're registered in the French healthcare system. It doesn't give you any right to stay in France. So if you do have a salaried work position and you are working in France and paying social charges, then you are eligible to have a carte vitale and to be in the CQ system for the time that you are living and working in France. And it's very common, like even for language assistance, for example, you come on a 7-month contract to teach English and you can get on the healthcare system and you're assigned a temporary social security number and all of that. However, it takes a very long time between when the initial hiring declaration is made and you actually receive proof of coverage into the French healthcare system. It does tend to go a little bit more quickly when you're working because there's not that 3-month delay of having to wait to register. But you still have to provide a lot of documents, including your birth certificate, any other like name change, marriage certificate, divorce certificate, etc. And so it takes as long as it takes. A lot of people do not receive their carte vitale within the first year or within 7 to 8 months. So you certainly can apply for it. Again, if you are working, your right to health care would be backdated to the date that you started working. So you could eventually get receipts reimbursed if you had medical treatment during the time between becoming eligible and actually receiving the social security number and your attestation des droits. But just be aware that it's going to take a very long time. Now, it doesn't give you any right to stay in France. If you leave France, which you're required to do at the end of a working holiday visa, you cannot, there's no way to extend your stay, even if you like marry a French person, you can't do it. So you would have to leave and apply for a new visa and come back. Now, that being said, if you had been residing in France for that whole time and paying into the system, it should be fairly straightforward to either keep the card active or reactivate it quickly after you get back with a new visa. Michelle, when applying for the Profession Libérale Visa, we now have to have the equivalent of annual gross SMIC in a French bank account for the business plan approval. For the Profession Libérale Visa itself, do we need both the annual gross SMIC in a French account and the recommended annual net SMIC in our own local account to show sufficient funds to the consulate, or does the French bank account suffice? I believe the French bank account with the funds will suffice. We haven't had any issues with that. I mean, that's the same amount that you would need to show to the consulate previously. You're not paying it to anybody. It's still available to you. It's just located in France instead of outside of France. Candace, if I earn a dual LLM that takes 18 months to complete and I add 6 months of language school prior to or after the degree, do those 2 degrees count towards residency citizenship? So if you're residing in France for 2 months, that time counts towards residency, assuming that you're able to change your status to something else. However, that combination is not sufficient to count for the 2 years with a French degree that would enable you to get a recherche d'emploi création d'entreprise visa because it has to be 2 years of education leading to a degree in an accredited French program. You would be able to be sponsored, but you wouldn't have the same advantages in terms of, the company would still have to show that they tried to hire a French person. You would still have to get work authorization unless your salary was high enough, things like that. How does earning a degree in France fast forward one to citizenship? There's no such thing as a fast forward in France. And I know that there are some like influencers that will tell you that, oh, you can get French citizenship by studying for 2 years in France. And here's the thing, it is technically possible to apply for French citizenship if you study for 2 years in France in higher education and earn a French degree. However, you still have to meet all of the other requirements for financial stability and integration. So that means that you have to have 2 to 3 years in a CDI, so a long-term work contract. You're out of your trial period. You've been earning consistently above minimum wage. If you've been in CDD, so temporary work contracts recurring, then you would need to have 3 years of proof of continually being employed. There might be a few gaps, but if you're earning more than minimum wage for more than 3 years, even accumulating multiple contracts, that normally should be okay, but it's very much up to the discretion of the person reviewing your file. If you're self-employed or starting a business, you need to be earning at least SMIC from the French company or self-employment activity and for 3 years. So none of those things can overlap with you being a student because when you're a student, the primary purpose of your activity is to study. So basically, you still have to wait the 5 years like anybody else. And I've seen these posts too on social media, and it is not really accurate at all what they say. Ursula, I would apply from New York City, intending to start in Paris, but then would research where to base myself long term once in France. If I apply from a visa from NYC, would I need to have everything in order, finances from the day I apply or financials requested over the course of the application? Seeking a long stay visa, which allows me to work freelance in the US and UK if opportunities arise. Is there such a thing? Okay, so in order to apply for a Profession Libérale Visa to be a freelancer in France, there's a couple of different things that you need to show. One is that you have a business plan with proof of professional activity in France, potential clients, networking opportunities, etc. Doesn't necessarily have to be contacts, but you have to have a business reason for relocating to France. Two is your business has to plan to earn at least French minimum wage, which is at least 1,823 euros per month. So there's no such thing as getting a visa to work if the opportunity arises. You have to have a plan and be executing that plan when you arrive. So you need to have all of this in order well in advance of applying for your visa. Typically, we advise starting to work with us about 6 months before you want to arrive in France with your visa, especially now because the business plan pre-approval is so finicky. It takes as long as it takes. It's different all over the country. We don't really have any visibility on how long it's going to take to get your business plan approved. So really important to start planning well in advance and get all the documents together first. When applying for a visa from the US, is it essential to use the same residential address or is it possible to update a change of address while waiting for approval? Asking as I will be moving and will be using a mail forwarding service. So when you apply for your visa at TLS, you are going to pay for a FedEx or UPS envelope that they will send your passport back to you in. So you don't have to use the same address on your FedEx envelope as was on your visa appointment. That doesn't really matter. Just what matters is that you're able to go and pick it up whenever it gets sent back, which normally is going to be about 2 weeks later or less. Mary, to secure a long stay visa, proof of housing is needed. How far in advance should I start that search process for a housing in a popular location like Nice or Paris? Okay, so typically what we advise for especially these big cities is looking at reserving temporary housing like an Airbnb or a hotel that will allow you to cancel partway through your stay, like an apart hotel. We've had some success with that. And having about 6 to 8 weeks of housing. Other cities, I say 4 to 6. Nice and Paris, definitely 6 to 8 because it can take quite a long time. And then you really need to hit the ground running with looking for a long-term lease where you're going to be able to get bills in your name and mail. We usually advise working with someone who can go through the process of evaluating the rental applications, find things that fit your criteria and that are possibly going to accept you, because rental agents can tell the difference between one, the real places and the scams, two, the places where you might be able to work with the landlord versus the places where, you're really not going to be able to get anywhere if all of your income and everything is not French. So most of those companies are typically looking to work with you about 2 months before you want to actually start the process. So if, let's say, you want to arrive in France September 1st, there's obviously August in there where nothing is going to happen because people are on vacation until the end of August. You're going to contact these companies about around June, tell them when you're arriving, try to get on their calendar so that when you arrive, you can hit the ground running. Another thing that's really important to know is that furnished rentals and even unfurnished rentals in Paris and Nice only require 1 month notice. So it's not really possible to look really far in advance to see what's available because it will all be gone. Things get signed right away. You call 15 minutes after a listing opens up and they've already got 100 applications. So you need to be really reactive, really quick, and just be aware that once you find a place and are looking at taking it, like you have to react and be willing to start paying rent right away. Hello, I have a long stay visitor visa. I understand it can be renewed yearly in France. After the initial 5 years, is it still necessary to renew yearly? Does this go on indefinitely or until citizenship is obtained? Okay, so it does have to be done yearly, and the good news is that it is submitted online for a visitor visa, and the main thing that you have to do in person is go to the prefecture to pick it up. You do have to provide updated documents, financials, details, photo, all of that every year. Now, the good news, especially for holders of the visitor visa, is that it used to be quite difficult, if not impossible, to ever get a longer term carte de séjour on the visitor visa. People were renewing them every year for 8, 10, 12 years and never getting a long-term 10-year card. However, there are some new EU regulations or they're being enforced newly, that are encouraging different EU countries to provide 10-year residence cards to people who have resided in France for more than 5 years. So if you're under 65, in order to get a 10-year card after renewing 5 years in France and respecting all of the conditions of your visa type, like not working, filing your taxes, all of that stuff, you should be able to request a 10-year card. You will have to meet the requirements of having a B1 level of French. So you take a French language test and pass the civics test for the 10-year residence card. And if you can do those two things and meet all of the other requirements, then you should be able to get a 10-year card. If you're over 65, you are exempt from both the language requirement and the civics test. I've heard anecdotes of people being able to get the 10-year card automatically after 5 years in certain areas, but if not, you can ask for it and provide some additional documents in your request and hopefully get it after 5 years. Okay. Are there forms for filling out the French income tax? My situation is fairly simple as a retired person. How many times per year is this filed and what are the dates? So it is the beginning of French tax season. It opened up April 9th. If you resided in France to live in 2025, you should file a French tax return. It's a little bit late to start looking for an accountant for this now. The ones who specialize in French taxes, and especially French taxes for US and UK citizens in France, are already pretty booked. You can try to go to your local tax office with your documents and get help from someone there. Many local universities offer free consultations, and you can go make an appointment and have them help you fill it out. Your first tax declaration does need to be done and sent in on paper, and then in subsequent years, you'll have your login details to submit your application online. The due dates vary by department. Let me tell you what they are. So if you're sending it on paper, it has to be done relatively quickly, May 19th. If you have to file on paper, it's May 19th. If you're in departments 1 through 19, your deadline is May 21st. If you're in 20 to 54, including Corsica, 2A and 2B, your deadline is May 28th. If you're in 55 through the end, your deadline is June 4th. And if you're a non-French resident but you have French source income, your deadline is also May 21st. TV. There is a film certificate program I want to attend in Paris that lasts 1 year. Will I become a tax resident even though I will be traveling back and forth from Paris to the US frequently and not going to live in Paris? Is there a student visa that one can apply for when one is not a tax resident? No, there's only one kind of student visa. There are some that are not renewable. The thing that you're going to need to, in this situation, the tax office would look at a lot of different things, including the center of all of your interests, which might remain the US for the time of your studies. But then again, it depends on, do you eventually stay in France and renew your visa, in which case you're going to want to have a tax declaration filed. The other thing to consider too is that the student visa only allows you to work 964 hours per visa year, and that has to be on a CDD or a CDI, so a French work contract type with a French company, and you can't be self-employed, run a business, etc. So if that were to be the reason for traveling back and forth, you would want to potentially rethink that plan. If I must be a tax resident during a year's program as a student, how easy it is to go off that status the next year. If you leave, then you're no longer a tax resident. But France does look at worldwide income and assets. If certain things are exempt in your first 5 years as a French tax resident, but it is really important to be aware of those issues before you move here. Bryn, I have French citizenship and my husband will need a spouse visa. Does he apply from the US? Yes. He's initially coming for 3 weeks to help move, and so our kids can arrive before school starts, only, and then he has to finish up work for 2 months before coming back to join the rest of the family in France for good. We're deciding to decide when the best time is for him to apply for a visa based on this timeline. So my recommendation would be that if he comes, stays for 3 weeks, goes back and spends 2 months outside of France, that's going to be a little bit tricky in terms of all of the paperwork and admin that need to get started. So my recommendation would be make sure that you have all the documents together well in advance. You make sure that your marriage is registered, your children's birth is registered, all of that, and you have your livret de famille. And then after you all move over, he comes back and applies for the visa during those 2 months. That would be my recommendation on timeline. John, I am planning to move to Paris around October 1st, assuming I receive my VLSTS visa. Okay, I will be retired and not working. Okay, so we're looking at a visitor visa here. I'm looking into Airbnb for my initial 3 month stay. Most require a mobility lease or a bimobilité for rentals of that length. Yeah, so you're not going to be eligible for a bimobilité because the conditions are that you're in like a temporary school or work program in order to have a lease for less than a year. So that is an unfortunate consequence of the Airbnb restrictions coming into effect. You can look in a city or a town outside of Paris that would not be restricted in the same way. You could potentially look at apart hotels where, you have a little apartment with a kitchenette or something. There are some that will allow you to give 1 week's notice. Like you can reserve for 3 months. You only have to pay through like a 1 week notice. So if you end up staying there for 6 weeks, you cancel in week 5 and you don't have to pay the rest of the reservation. So something like that could work there as well. Many places now in Paris will only offer a civil code lease, which is basically a not super legal kind of lease that basically says that it's your secondary residence and not your primary residence. I hate it. I think it's wrong. It is annoying and it doesn't fit the qualifications that people moving to France have. However, in Paris, it's really the main option at this point. So that would be something that you would want to look at for your first year. And I don't recommend it. I don't like that option, but really in certain cities like Paris and Nice, it's the main option that you have. Richard, I am looking for ways to be involved and have an exchange with French society once I have a permanent residence and start living in France. How can one be involved as a volunteer? I'm looking into which city and would it be best to create an involvement? I am deciding between Paris and Lyon. So both of those cities are really big, pretty international, have a lot of opportunities for getting out and doing things. But every town has something called like the local Forum des Associations. And this is an event that normally happens in September, organized by basically every town, where they're going to have all of the groups and activities and associations available and with tables, and you can go and join all of the things. So I would highly recommend doing that when you arrive in France. If you arrive in the summer or at the beginning of the academic year, again, this is normally in September. If you arrive in the spring, you'll want to contact your mairie to see if they have like a book or a pamphlet about all of the associations to see what you might want to join. Some of them, if they have limited membership, then you have to join them at certain times of the year, and sometimes the enrollments start in June for the following year, September to June. So I would recommend starting with that. You can also contact a lot of the expat associations. There's the American Club in Lyon and in Paris. There's ARO, which is the Association of Americans Resident Overseas. I'm a board member. It's based in Paris, but we have members all over France. Those are the main ones. For the women in the chat, there's a couple of women's organizations. There's AAWE, there's American Women's Group in Bordeaux. I think there's one in Lyon, etc. So I would recommend looking at a combination of, French and American or British, if you're British, organizations that you can join. And if you join some of the Facebook or social media groups too, like sometimes they'll have recommendations. You can ask what good recommendations they are. T, with the drop of the US dollar and the need to prove 3 times the monthly rent amount as income, will the landlord or guarantee accept supplementing Social Security and small pension with a set monthly amount transferred from an IRA? Yeah, so guarantee will typically accept financial resources from the US, whether it's pension or Social Security or whatever. So you'll want to get a currency account so that you can manage the best exchange rate with that. And that's something we can help you do. Lee, okay, this is a good segue. I've heard the French government does not accept IRAs and other investments to count towards the financial amount you need to qualify for residency. So they like to see it, but the amount that they're looking for is cash. Investments can lose value, so you need to either be receiving a monthly pension amount into your bank account every month that you can show going back several months, or you need to show about 20,000 euros in cash. If I buy a house in France before I move there and will own the house, will I be taxed on it by the US or France? So you'll pay property taxes on a French property in France. There won't be any US taxes on that. You will file French taxes because you will be residing in France with a visa, but if your income is primarily from retirement pensions, you are not going to really be paying any French tax. You do not have to file a French tax declaration if you only own property in France and don't have any income from France, although you will be assessed for French property taxes. So taxe foncière is for the owner of a property based on the value of the land and the building. Taxe d'habitation, or the tax on secondary residences, are taxes on the rental value of the property. And so if you live there, you should not be paying taxe d'habitation if it's your full-time residence. If you do not live there and it's a secondary residence, then you will be paying a secondary residence tax. Karen, I have a talent passport visa. I believe you're profession artistique. This is my first year of filing taxes. Do I put all the money I made after May 15th when I started my business, even if some of that income was sold in the United States? The paintings sold in the US were made in the US, but sold after the 16th. Yeah, I mean, I would probably report that in France. That gets a little bit tricky, and I guess it would depend on whether or not you still have an active US business, because technically, if you went back and did the work in the US and sold it in the US, that would technically be US taxable. But you would want to talk to an accountant about that. And hopefully, when you arrived, you have been doing your monthly declarations on your income from your business so that your tax declarations are really easy. You do have to file regular income declarations for a business, even outside of just doing the annual declaration for income tax. All right. I'm done with the pre-submitted questions, so I'm going to go over to the Q&A box. Doug, is it ever possible to rent for an initial 3 months the same place that upon returning from the States? So if it's a temporary seasonal rental, it can only be a maximum of 90 days, and that's per couple. So you can't rent a place for more than 90 days if it's a gîte or an Airbnb or something. within those first 3 months, you need to find a long-term place that will give you a lease and where you'll be able to set up bills in your name, including electricity, utilities, very important, and where you can get mail. So, no, you cannot, for very practical and important reasons, you cannot just go and do 3 months of Airbnb in four different Airbnbs, and it's not possible to re-rent the same one for an extended period of time unless the owner is willing to actually draft a legal French lease for you. Is it much less likely to be approved for a VLSTS, presumably a visitor visa, with gross retirement income from the US federal government, but with no savings to deposit initially into a French bank account? So you need to have actual cash as part of the moving process, even if you have more than 1,500 euros per month of recurring revenue. So you need to build up some cash resources before you apply for your visa. Margaret, once you enter France on a long stay visa for permanent residence, are you able to travel abroad, such as coming back to the US to visit family? Are there recommended limits for how long you should not stay out of France without jeopardizing extending the long-term visa? So during your first year in France, there is a ton of admin to do. If you're retired, it's primarily the OFI medical check that you do not want to miss. If you have another type of visa like Profession Libérale or, you're the spouse of a French citizen or something like that, you're going to have a lot of things to do during the first year, from working on your French and taking a French language test to doing the four mandatory civics classes and the OFI medical visit to studying for and passing the French civics exam. And that is even without getting into the fact that everything from signing up for the French healthcare system, getting your driver's license exchanged, all of that is going to take multiple months and require pretty quick back and forth with a French administration once they send you a request for additional information, which they definitely will do. So theoretically, you can travel back and forth. You can be out of town for a couple of weeks. It is expected that you're spending more than 6 months in France, both for purposes of getting on the French healthcare system and for the purposes of living in France. But realistically, you need to be spending the majority of your time in France. It's really important. Doug, if I'm going to marry a woman from the Ukraine as a US citizen, how should I consult an immigration specialist? Or in France or the US if my fiance comes temporarily to the US first? So, in order to get her temporarily to the US, you would need to go through the process to get her a US visa. So, that would be done with a US immigration specialist. Once you're married, she would be able to come with you to France and would need a lot of copies of documents and obviously a copy of your marriage certificate. And she would either need to have her own financial resources or you would be able to financially sponsor someone if you are married. Okay, how is US source income taxed in France for a US citizen living and working in France? Okay, that's a really big question. That is its own webinar. And also, it's a question for an accountant because I'm not an accountant. The overview I will give you is typically US source dividends, interest, capital gains are taxed in France first, retirement pensions as well, whether that's Social Security, IRA, 401k, etc. Any earned income, business, self-employment, salary is going to be taxed in France first. So you'll need to talk through the specifics with a French accountant. Margaret, I'm very interested in buying a house or apartment in France. What is the current climate in France with regard to squatters quickly occupying your home while you're abroad for a couple of weeks or months? That's not really a question that I can answer, but I mean, you do need to have somebody like paying attention to your house and checking on it and checking your mail. But I mean, in terms of prevalence, no idea. Kendra, does the 20,000 euros need to be in a French bank account or can it be in a US bank account? If it's for starting a business, whether it's a passport talent, the 30,000 euros French investment into the escrow account for starting your company, or if it's Profession Libérale, 20,000 euros in a bank account on French territory, those need to be in French accounts. Any other visa type, you can have US bank accounts to start. Can I buy a car and insurance if I'm on a tourist visa? I assume you mean just on your passport and not on any visa at all. I own a house and have a French bank account. So the official answer is that you need to be residing in France in order to have a car and be insured in France. Some people will sometimes get away with buying and registering a car in France. It can be a problem for you though, because if you get speeding tickets, they get sent to your house. And if you're not there and you get tickets, then you're going to have a big problem. Oh, I did have Kendra, are some prefectures more streamlined than others in terms of paperwork and other visa things? I'm in the process of choosing where to live. No, do not pick where to live based on the prefecture. None of them are good. I will say that for nationality applications, Paris is probably the quickest, but for everywhere else, it doesn't matter. Laura, I've been divorced twice. My current legal name is my maiden name. Do I need to provide divorce and name change documentation? And what about a man who has not ever changed his name? Well, men have it easy. This is a case of institutionalized misogyny that makes me angry every time. It takes women longer to get on the French healthcare system than men. So there's nothing to be done about that. That being said, if you change back to your maiden name, in most cases, they're not going to ask for it for the healthcare system. If your name on your passport and the name on your birth certificate match exactly, then it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, so if you do have more questions and you want to have an individual consultation, in this Q&A, we try to cover 1 to 2 questions per person. But if you do have more questions, you want to talk through your timeline, all of the different topics and how they interplay and come up with a plan for moving to France, I'm going to give you the link to schedule a consultation with me. It's a 1 hour consultation on Zoom. And then if you sign up for one of our service packages within 90 days, then we will deduct it as a credit against the cost of the service package. So I will let you know when you can sign up for the summit. If you got the reminders for this Q&A, then you're on our list and so you will get notification when it comes out. I'm talking with more speakers this week. I'm really excited about the whole project coming together. So you will get an invitation in your email probably by the beginning of May. And again, the dates are June 15th to 19th. So thank you so much for coming. I'm also going to give you a link to purchase foolproof French visas if you don't already have the 2026 edition. If you do already have a previous edition, you can, like I said, leave us a review on Amazon and send it to us, and we will grant you access to the ebook because there have been a lot of changes. There have been a lot of changes, and there will still be more to come. So thank you so much for your time this evening or today, for those of you who are in the States and having lunch. It was nice to see you. The next Move to France Q&A, let me check the date for you. This one was late because of Easter Monday, and the next one, I believe, is May 4th. Yes, Monday, May 4th is the next Q&A. So same time, same place, and I will see you then. All right, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.